Who are you and how did you get here? My name is Alimatu Dimonekene, and I am a global campaigner, an activist, and an advocate for women and girls' rights. And I am a strong believer in feminism and what that means for myself as an African woman, Black, living in the United Kingdom, but doing an awful lot of work also in Africa. I'm a mother of three wonderful children, and I come from Sierra Leone, where I was born. But I've lived in the United Kingdom more so than I've lived in Sierra Leone, so I consider myself also as a British citizen. And I founded an online organization called A Girl at a Time, which sets out to support, enable, empower, encourage young people to be advocates of change. Now, and I'm also a survivor of an ancient practice, harmful practice called female genital mutilation. Other people call it cutting, depending on what part of the world you're from. And it's an abuse that left me questioning who I was in terms of my identity and what I could be in my community. So A Girl at a Time was born because the issues are many, and we have got to start from somewhere by focusing on a girl at a time. And also my day job, I'm also an advocate and a caseworker supporting women who are victims of domestic violence. And I lobby for change within the UK community because I'm based in the UK. And as an activist, I'm often called by governments, organizations, agencies to lend my voice, give my sort of opinion, express my experiences of undergoing abuse and how that could look like for potential victims and how we could prevent and stop it. And also, I lecture at the London School of Tropical Medicine, Hygiene and Medicine, and I will do whatever it will take to become or be that leader of change in my community. So, in a nutshell, even though I do quite a lot, but I would only say I'm an all rounder. I do everything and everything. And I love to cook, and I love so many things that make me unique. To share a turning point, an experience that has led me to this point. In 2012, I was fortunate to be invited to be a protocol officer for the London Olympic Games. And it was an experience I really did not understand initially what it meant in terms of boosting my confidence and really exerting me in a place where I ought to have been in, where it was bringing people together and it was rallying for change and sharing the values and what we believe would be the best games ever, I think was a turning point for me. Another turning point was in 2014. Despite my years of lending my voice as an activist, as a campaigner against domestic violence, honor based abuse, and harmful practices, I really could not come to a place where I could express what was something that was very personal to me until I met this incredible woman who just looked and said, Alima, your voice is needed in this space. You are this firm believer of feminism. You are a feminist, and the ideals of feminism runs through you, and you would be the best advocate in this space. As much as I was very reluctant to come forward, I think it was a perfect timing, and obviously coincidence played a big part in it. And so she invited me to this meeting. And in fact, she didn't say he was going to be at that meeting. And in fact, who was there was the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, David Cameron, his counterpart, Nick Clegg, because there was a coalition government at the time in 2014. And they said, we would like to know, as politicians, as leaders of the government, as powerful people who have the power to make that change, what can we do? And what does FGM means for you? So I found myself in a room full of about 100 people telling them for the first time over 20 plus years of my personal experience. So that led to a series of events. First was a global summit, which was called the Girls Summit. And I myself was sort of called to open the event with a young woman from India who was a survivor of child marriage. And both of us started this remarkable journey of transforming our community, starting from our countries of origin. So, going back to Sierra Leone and working within the Sierra Leonean communities and letting people know this practice has got to end. Reinforcing my feminist leadership belief system and bringing something that was so needed. Communities needed to know that women have a place in their society and women can be leaders, because I am an example of such a person who has led in so many things I was doing at that time. Because initially the view was that a woman wouldn't go to school, wouldn't have good grades, wouldn't finish university, cannot look after her children if she's not married. Well, I overcame all those challenges and I was better even more. I was a breadwinner and I was well known in my community for what I believed in, and I was giving back a lot. And so that was a huge moment in my work as a feminist leader, and it spearheaded what it became Alimatu Dimonekene, the campaigner. And subsequently, that also led to another series, which where I was invited by the Canadian Women and Children Health and the Global Grand Challenge, Global Health Organization, looking at gender equality, gender disparities, why girls would not move forward, why certain groups of communities, particularly indigenous communities, were left behind, and how that would look like. Now, that gave birth to what we now know as the Feminist International Assistance Policy, which Canada has since put forward as a strong policy that other countries are looking at. Because what I said at that time was how gender equity and gender equality goes hand in hand. And if we as feminists who were in that room, a whole a background of feminists, men, women, intersectionality, disabled, gay, non binary, transgender. We were all in that room driving for what was to be a policy that would transcend all scope in terms of the feminist leadership dynamics. And it was important. And really saw that as my sort of my point of no return in actual fact. And I think I took on board what that style of leadership was, and I brought it into this new organization, which is a girl at a time, founded in 2019. So, and if we were to essentially achieve gender equality, we needed to look at the approach from a feminist leadership lens, because it capsulates everything that we all talk about, which is the redistribution of power, redistribution of responsibilities, regardless of your age, regardless of your ethnicity, regardless of your religious affiliation or your sexual orientation. And I think it was very powerful in sort of a roundabout way. That was for me the pivotal moment. These three instances of my life changed my perspective in who I was as a feminist. It made me realize how powerful my voice was in exerting and calling for change. But what does feminist leadership means and look like for you? It means being more inclusive, being considerate about issues affecting everybody, regardless of who they are. So, if, for example, I am an advocate for women who are victims of violence, and often I have to move women into refuge safe spaces, move them around from their safe neighborhood to another neighborhood. So, it's taking into account the impact the move might have on the woman if they have children, what it would mean for the children, and how best I would be in order to support that woman, and being selective of services that we provide. It's an inclusive world, and being very thoughtful. And even when we're selecting for jobs, it has to be non-gender specific, because we want to bring everybody along, be more encourage intersectionality in our selection processes. And so I work with a dynamics of people. And it brings flavor to the work we do. It brings a greater understanding. And we all have shared values that we can all bring to this wonderful world we're living in. Feminist leadership is for me, is who I am. It's my self identity, is what I self identify as, is what I live through day to day. Yes, I'm a female, I'm a woman, I'm a mother, an African living in the UK but working more predominantly in Africa. It's everything that I am. And so sharing and being part of the wider community, expressing the discourse that would incorporate inclusivity and removing marginalization, removing barriers and stigma, removing things that would keep anyone behind is what I define as my kind of leadership in terms of feminist leadership role. And what advice would I give to someone who wants to practice feminist leadership in their position? Now, this goes for young people. It's a question I'm often asked. I often say to those young people, be open minded. Do not have restrictions around you because sadly, the society we are living in put barriers and constructs in the path of people's liberation from social justice to in inclusivity to what we find ourselves and how we identify ourselves. So, as a young person, is to read on so many issues around feminist leadership. Look at movements. You could even start a movement. So it's about encouraging to network, meet other feminists. Don't limit yourself to one group of feminists because, growing up as an African woman, I learned African feminism is totally different from European feminism. European feminism is different from that of women in the Arab world. But we all see ourselves as one sisterhood, brotherhood, one community, shared values, fighting a common cause, ending in our case, so many of us, how do we end in social injustices? How do we end racism? How do we end violence against women and girls? How do we end marginalization of people with disability? How do we bring people that are non-participatory in things like election? So it's so important for a young leader to look at what works for you. Where do you see yourself? What speaks your language? Because we are growing in a community that's evolving. Things are changing. What my mother experienced in terms of her feminism and what that was for, what that was like, was slowly embedded in misogyny and patriarchal. I always call my mother, she's like this driver of patriarchy, because it's what she was taught and what she knows, and she knows nothing else. It's only now we're having a conversation, myself, my mother, and my girls, and we're all seeing I'm even different to my girls. What I may think I have sort of grown into, it's a different experience for them. So I would encourage young people to be open minded. Feminism for me is fluidity, it moves around, it takes on to all the spaces that it needs to go, it brings the best out of it, and it works within that mold. And it encourages you to be whoever you want to be, and no matter what your limitations are, because you don't feel limited. You feel empowered, you feel encouraged, you enable to be your own person. And this is what I love about feminist leadership. Thank you.